So Marvel Rivals is a crazy fun hero shooter that really embodies the Marvel characters. What I think would make the game a lot better is some Spider-Man characters. I know we already have Venom and Penny Parker in the game, so maybe I'm asking for too much. But you have to admit some Spider-Man characters like Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and even Miles Morales would be pretty sick. I compiled a list of 10 Spider-Man characters I want to see in Marvel Rivals that I think will very much change the game. I gave them all ultimates and suggested what abilities they'll have in the game. I seen other people making character wish list videos, so why not make my own? So let's break this down. 10 Spider-Man characters I'd love to see in Marvel Rivals. Starting with Green Goblin. This OG Spider-Man villain would be so fun and super annoying for enemy teams. Imagine a high-speeding goblin flying around the map, shooting machine guns and throwing pumpkin bombs. He will work around his glider, being able to get off his glider, doing some physical attacks, or even being knocked off by enemy opponents. As well as he could set up his glider as a turret. A backline nightmare. I want the goblin to be able to send his glider out and return it, damaging enemies along the glider's path. Kind of like Thor's hammer ability where he could throw his hammer back and forth, damaging enemies. For his ultimate, I want him to douse an area full of poison gas, dealing massive damage to anybody caught inside. Perfect for holding or capturing a point, or a massive pumpkin bomb similar to Iron Man's pulse cannon. Either way, the goblin is not one to trifle with. Next on my list is Dr. Octopus. This guy would be a vanguard, using his robotic tentacles to shield himself as well as an offensive weapon. Think of Mr. Fantastic, how he could grab enemies and throw them around. What would make Doc Ock different though is that his tentacles will have a wrapping strangling passive. Meaning if he has a hold on you, he will cause damage over time until you escape. Kind of like Venom's grab ability, but more deadly. Plus he has 4 arms, that means 4 enemies can be locked onto. I could also see him having a slam attack where he slams all the enemies he's holding onto to the ground. The more enemies he has locked on, the more damage is done. For an ultimate, could be something like a damage and health boost, where his tentacles gets covered with electricity, dealing insane damage, plus he gets more health over time. Almost like Hulk's ultimate, except instead of smashing, he's using his tentacles. Now Mysterio's going to play a little like Loki, where the best players are going to deceive the enemy. He's going to be a specialist. Maybe give him a ray gun where he could deal damage and heal people. Like Loki, he'll be able to duplicate himself, but instead of his clones standing stationary, idling by, they will mimic his movements, confusing the enemies into which one is the real Mysterio. I'm thinking 2 clones, perfect for moving the payload. He could also use gadgets like a smoke screen that hides him and the whole team while also providing heals for the team. As for his ultimate, I'm thinking something like Mirage from Apex. He pulls out a bunch of clones that walk around and hide him. It would be cool if the clones from his ult could also shoot his ray gun, dealing massive damage and heals to everyone around him. He'd be a nightmare to play against, but an amazing addition. I could also see a mischievous team up with Mysterio, Loki, and Deadpool. That would be sick. Rhino is obviously a vanguard. Pretty standard, he charges at enemy head first like a rhino. But here's the kicker. If he directly charges at an enemy, anybody caught in his path will get stuck to his horn. If he smashes a stuck enemy to a wall, it will deal devastating damage, as well as giving him a health boost. As for an ultimate, he could smash the ground so hard that it stuns everyone around him, leaving them perfectly vulnerable for Rhino to charge at them. I wonder if he could stack multiple enemies with his charge. That would be nice. He'd be a powerhouse and a great pick for players who love to play as aggressive tanks. Now, I have Black Cat on my list. Let's talk about Black Cat. This foxy kitty would be a crazy specialist. All stealth. She could have a grappling hook that zips her to vantage points, providing health for the team. She can throw projectiles as well as heal and damage, and would have a shadow passive that will make her invisible for a brief second. I could also see Black Cat extending the team up with Spider-Man and Squirrel Girl. She'd be a mix of a sneaky assassin as well as a slippery escape artist, and I love to see how she'll play in Marvel Rivals. And her ult would give her team a health and damage boost. Think of Rocket the Raccoon's ult, but instead of just being a damage booster, it would also be a health booster as well. Now, we gotta have Miles Morales in here. He wouldn't just be a reskin of Spider-Man, his Venom shock and invisibility will make him more interesting. He'd be a hybrid between a duelist and a specialist, but I'm leading him more as a specialist role, zipping through the battlefield, stunning enemies, and electrocuting people with his electric punches. For his ultimate, I'm thinking of a Venom blast that damages multiple enemies at once, as well as healing team members caught in the blast. He'll be one of the most fun characters to play as, and I really hope to see him added in Rivals. Lizard would be a terrifying vanguard. Think about it. He's got regenerative health, insane melee power, and an intimidating presence on the battlefield. He could have a tail swipe that knocks enemies back, a lunge attack that lets him leap onto enemies as well as giving him a health boost, and an ultimate where he fully unleashes his animal instincts, increasing his attack speed, resistance to damage for a short period of time. He'd be a beast in close combat, and I think he'd bring a completely different vibe to the game. Scorpion is a must for Marvel Rivals. He'd be a duelist with mid-range melee attacks, using his tail to strike opponents from a distance. Maybe he will have a poison ability that weakens enemies over time, or a grapple move that lets him swing across the map like Spider-Man, but deadlier. And for his ultimate, I'm thinking he could use his tail as a blast cannon that will unleash a deadly beam, melting anybody caught in the way. He'd be a solid choice for aggressive players who want to keep pressure on enemy opponents. Sandman will be insane to add in this game. Think about it. He'll be a mix between Mei and Orisa from Overwatch. He could create sand walls to block attacks, morph his hands into massive weapons, and for his ult, he'll turn into a giant sand monster, becoming almost unkillable for a few seconds, dealing massive environmental damage. He'll be a nightmare to deal with and a super unique addition to the roster. And finally, I gotta give this last spot to the Shocker. He's underrated, but he'd be so fun in Marvel Rivals. He'd be a specialist with shockwave base attacks used for damage and healing, fine concussive blast that knocks enemies back, and maybe he has an ability that charges up for a massive shockwave, destroying enemies caught in the blast and healing teammates also. And for his ultimate, I see him overloading his gauntlets, creating a chain reaction of shockwaves that rip through the battlefield. He'd be super fun in a high damage pick, and I think he'd add a lot of value to the game. Definitely more of an attack-based specialist. So those are the 10 Spider-Man characters I really hope to see in Marvel Rivals. Some of them feel like must-haves, while others could add some unique mechanics that would make the game feel a lot better. But what do you think? Who would you want to see added to the roster? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love Marvel Rivals content, make sure to hit the subscribe button, as this channel is starting to become more and more of a Marvel Rivals channel. Lithy B, out.